good morning. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. This morning, I'm very pleased to have with me as my guest Lora Blum, who's the general counsel of Momentiv, also formerly known as SurveyMonkey. Lora, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Richard. It's great to be here.
So, Lora, I know we've known each other for many years, but let me start by asking you why you went to law school in the first place.
The age-old question.
The age-old question.
I was interested in law school from a really young age. I was inspired, actually, this is sort of a funny story, by a cousin of mine who lived in the Virgin Islands. And when I was a kid, we got to go to his wedding in the Virgin Islands when I was about 9 years old. And so I think as a young person, I believed that all lawyers lived in the Virgin Islands because he also married a woman who was a lawyer. And so that was kind of something that stuck with me. In all seriousness, though, that was when I was fascinated by my cousin and talked to him a lot just as a little kid and was interested in what he did. And from then on, always had a bit of an interest in law. And then during college, continued to be interested, was a history major, but always thought I would probably go to law school because it just continued to be something that was something I liked the idea of being able to question things. I liked the idea of being able to argue about things. I did not want to be a litigator. I kind of knew that early on, even though that was kind of the exposure I think you get in the media and everything is really more litigation. But I kind of liked the idea of understanding the law and using it in whatever I did. But I had a sense I didn't want to be a litigator. Though I enjoyed, classes that had to do with litigation. So I just always kind of wanted to go to law school and ended up doing it.
Huh. What kind of lawyer was your cousin?
Oh, he actually is a tax lawyer of all things. And he has his own practice and now lives mostly in New York, but still spends quite a bit of time in the Virgin Islands. And he has his own firm that does a lot of interesting structuring.
Well, maybe that probably explains why he's in the Virgin Islands. So you said you kind of knew you were going to be a transactional lawyer. How did you know about transactional lawyers? Because most people, as they're growing up, they, as you said, they only get exposed to lawyers on TV, and so they always think of lawyers as being litigators. How did you even know about that practice?
That's a good question. I'm not quite sure when I realized you did not have to go to court to be a lawyer. But as going to school in the Bay Area, I went to Cal undergrad. I was from the East Coast. I am from the East Coast originally. And I was in college in the early 90s, didn't have like a ton of exposure to tech or anything early on. But then when I was in law school, I was down in LA, but had a little bit more exposure to some folks that did in-house work and just sort of talked to folks who did things that other than litigation and learned about different things you could do, whether it was sort of more what I do, which is more securities and transactional type work, or, trusts and estates. I actually was kind of interested in. I thought that, family law, I was that family law, not on the litigation side. I actually had a lot of interest in tax. I loved tax in law school, which is sort of a funny thing. I don't know how many people they love tax, but I thought it was really interesting. So some of the topics just always fascinated me, the ones that were less related to litigation, or ones where I shouldn't say less related to litigation, because you can always get into litigation over something, but the topics that were maybe where you could do things other than litigation always fascinated me. And I liked the idea of being able to collaborate as opposed to be in an adversarial position with folks. So that was something that interested me. I also always was kind of interested in business, and so knew some people who were lawyers but didn't necessarily practice. I have not gone that route. I've continued to practice, but that was something that also made me interested in doing something other than litigation.
Well, you picked a perfect time to begin your corporate practice. The 90s, Silicon Valley. I mean, what better time that could possibly have been? I'm assuming it was a blast being a corporate lawyer in the 90s.
Yeah, I started practicing at the very tail end of the 90s in 1999. And I sometimes joke that I learned by malpractice because things were so busy that it was a crazy time. And I sort of fell into, at my first law firm, working with a wonderful partner who really still to this day I'm pretty close with, and I consider her my mentor. But she was just incredibly busy doing a lot of capital markets work and needed folks to help her. And so I jumped right in. Didn't completely know what I was doing at the beginning, but thankfully through her help and a lot of other more seasoned professionals helped me learn a lot. It was a lot of fun. I worked with a lot of companies that were pre-revenue, but still doing things like going public. It was a very interesting time. You could put .com at the end of anything and people seem to want to finance it. But learned a lot about sort of how transactions are done, what people might be interested in looking for. And then when things sort of turned south and the .com bubble burst, the good news was I had a lot of really great training. So was able to sort of do some other interesting transactions, whether it was consolidations through mergers and acquisitions or some down round financings and helping some companies that, needed support to kind of keep going when the markets weren't so frothy. It was just really, really lots of interesting things I got to do from a very early time. So I feel really fortunate about the time that I started practicing.
So tell me, what made you decide to go in-house? I know you went in-house at some point here. Tell me where you went in-house and what made you decide to do that?
Yeah. So after a little over 10 years in private practice, I started working with a client that I'm sure lots of folks have heard of called LinkedIn. And the general counsel there, I had been working with the company for about maybe not quite a year. I can't remember. And she said she was looking for someone to help run the corporate function within her department. And I initially said no. I wasn't interested in going in-house. I really liked what I was doing. For various reasons, a little while later, she came back to me and asked again. And by that point in time, I'd been working with the company long enough that it became a more interesting proposition to me. And it just so happened that my husband had also changed jobs. And so, it seemed like he was in an interesting new role and maybe I was a little jealous. I don't know. And so I decided to look into it a little bit more. And I was really, really lucky because it was a client, I had exposure to a lot of information about LinkedIn. So this was 2010, early 2010. And I said, to my husband when I was thinking about going in-house, he thought I was a little bit crazy because I was a relatively new young partner at Jones Day at the time. We had a mortgage and 2 children in private school in San Francisco. And he said, "Do you want to go to this private company called LinkedIn? Like, what do you think?" And I said, "Well, it seems like a really great place. I understand the business. Because it's a client, I think it's going to do well. And if it doesn't do well, I could always go back to a firm or whatever. Like it's a good enough name that I don't think I'm going to destroy my career by trying to go in-house here." And to my delight, and somewhat I believed in the company, that's why I went there. But I never really understood how powerful the network was until I joined, and how awesome LinkedIn's products were until I actually became part of the company. And it did shock me how well the company did. And so I feel really
definitely
able to be a part of growth at LinkedIn. When I joined, I think we were about 600 employees. And by the time I left, after we got sold to Microsoft, we were about 10,000. And obviously I think folks still know LinkedIn, and it's doing wonderfully. And it's great to see how well the company continues to do after all this time. It will turn 20 on May 5th, which is really exciting. So that was how I landed in-house in a fantastic role, and got to be part of LinkedIn's IPO. We did probably 20 or 25 acquisitions on the buy side while I was there. We did a couple of equity follow-on offerings. We raised some debt. So I still got to exercise my transactional muscles, really like that. And then after we sold, the opportunity to go become the general counsel at SurveyMonkey came up. And so that's when I decided to go do that in January of 2017.
How did you compare being in-house? You've been in private practice for a pretty long time, 10 years, a long time. How did you kind of compare the two, and what was different, and what did you like about the differences?
Yeah, I actually really liked practicing in a firm. And so I never saw myself leaving, because I have some friends that didn't like it as much. I feel like I got very lucky with the people that I worked with. I actually worked at several different firms. I jumped around with a partner, but got very, very lucky to do some great work and work with great people. The opportunity to go to LinkedIn did seem special, and I'm really glad I did it. And what was interesting was once I went in-house, I was surprised by how much I liked it. And now I can't imagine not being in-house. As much as I never was looking to go in-house, I now feel really, I love working with the business and developing the relationships within the business. I love helping think about what we're going to do next. I love seeing all those transactions that I like to work on. I love seeing what impact that they have on the business. And it's just a different kind of work. I will say, when I was in-house at LinkedIn as the leading the corporate function there, I still felt more like a lawyer than a business person. I felt like, and now being a GC, I think I feel, even though I am responsible for all legal decisions of the company, and I take that responsibility very seriously, I feel like I'm more of a business person than a legal person. Even though, like I said, I'm, the legal decisions in the legal department is my ultimate responsibility. I feel much more part of the business and part of the executive team, which is really fun. And that was also something in making the move from LinkedIn to SurveyMonkey. I wasn't sure if I would like that as much as being in-house, but being able to still be kind of that specialist lawyer. But I have really enjoyed being in general counsel as well. It's been great.
So now that you were in private practice, you were, a corporate lawyer at a very large public company. You've been the GC now of SurveyMonkey, which I guess has been acquired now. What else do you see yourself doing? Anything else? Could you see yourself doing something totally in the business and outside of law, or would you want to do another startup, or what do you think?
It's a great question. We are in the process, SurveyMonkey now, Momentiv is in the process of an acquisition. So I've been thinking a lot about, what will be next. I don't know. And I don't know, I like to say, I don't totally know what I'm going to do when I grow up. But I really like what I'm doing. I will say, it's been, I don't know. I don't think I would go back to a firm. That would surprise me. I never say never. Yeah. I really like being a general counsel. I love the company I'm at. And so it's about to enter a new phase, and we're going to see what happens there. Ultimately, would I want to do something outside of a strictly legal role is a really good question. I have some friends that have done that and seem to really, really like it. I kind of do like being in my lane, but being able to contribute to other people's areas. So I don't know that I would actively seek out a non-legal role. I do know some people that have the roles have developed within their companies. They've been a GC or perhaps in the legal department, and then they've been able to find a different role or develop a different role because it just naturally, organically has happened. And I think I feel like if a non-pure legal role happened for me, would be the way that it happened. It would probably be within a company, whether it's this one or another one, and seeing if there's a way that that I can contribute beyond where I am. Like I said, not to say that if someone came to me and asked me to do something that was totally different, I wouldn't consider it. But I sort of feel like that would be the natural way for it to happen to me.
Well, Laura, I really appreciate your taking the time. Congratulations on all your success. If you do decide to go do something different or take another job, please come back and tell me about it.
I definitely will. Thanks so much, Richard.
This is Richard Hsu and Lora Blum. Thanks.